Are you ready? Let's go. Ready?
Ready.
Yeah, ready when you are.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Holden Shepherd, Heidi Anderson, Jan Latta, Alison Patterson, welcome to my little show.
Why do you call it a little chat show?
Jan Nichols, Sam Eichen, Annabelle Smith, Donna Mazza, Rebecca Watson, Jonelle Fraser, Tracy Jacobson, Adam Wallace, Monique Mulligan, Matt Glover, Karen Young. I don't even know where I'm going with this. Welcome to my show. I love interviews that turn into conversations and just go all sorts of interesting places. Before I go on, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and hit the bell on the YouTube channel so you get notifications when a new interview comes up. And it also looks good that I've got more subscribers. I've just finished having a chat with David Allan Petale, and he's the author of Locust Summer. It's out now through Fremantle Press. I taught David copywriting nearly 20 years ago at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. And so David and I have just had a fantastic catch up. One of the most incredible people with an amazing philosophy on life. And when you hear about his influences, his family, his upbringing, his adventures, it's mind-blowing. And we talk a lot about this book, Locust Summer, it's just out now, so you can grab a copy through Fremantle Press and your local bookshop. This is going to go gangbusters. It's such a West Australian story, but the themes are universal. Don't tell you more. You'll find out in the interview. Let's get into it. Pour her a coffee, glass of wine. Don't take the dog for a walk or anything like that, because you're going to be sitting down, you're going to be watching this and enjoying getting to know David Allan Petale. David Allan Petale, welcome to my show. How are you going?
I'm very well, thanks, Josh, and thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while, actually. So
well,
it's good to find you.
For 20 years, we've been needing to catch up. Now, obviously, you've just released this amazing book, Locust Summer, your debut novel. Hey, see, look at this. We're matching. Now, we're going to talk about this in a minute, because I know that these things don't come out of a vacuum. You've spent 9 years writing this, and it's an absolutely incredible read, but we'll get to this in a minute. Now, for full disclosure, for everyone watching, or maybe the one person watching, as Radioland, as I taught you, David, you have one listener. I taught David back 20 years ago at WAAPA, the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, for the broadcasting section, radio copywriting. And I spoke to David before. I said, I have your assessment here from 2001. Can I read out your assessment on my show? And you said, David, what did you say?
Go on.
And I think this sort of speaks volumes, actually, because anyway, so this is the assessment. Even though on the top I've written the word confidential.
Yeah, we can break that. That's fine.
We can break that.
Yeah.
It goes, David has some great ideas and is getting used to converting some of them into effective radio commercials. Idea generation is the hardest aspect to radio copywriting. However, David seems to be the master at it. He needs to work more on transferring those ideas into workable radio ads faster, though. Nonetheless, without the ideas, you've got nothing. And I gave you a pass.
Pretty fair. Pretty fair.
Well, exactly. I mean, look where you are now 20 years later. And also you run a business with your wife, which is a copywriting business. And I think I taught for about 3 years at WAAPA and also at the Academy of Radio. So I taught many people the art of radio copywriting and copywriting in general. You've actually gone off and you're doing copywriting. How did that happen?
Well, I was going to say your assessment of me is still very fair. I don't think I was ever the greatest student, and I continue not to be the greatest student. And I tend to only do very well in the things that I'm passionate about. So
same here.
I've been, and I think that's
me. Yeah,
that's right. And I think that's reflected in what you said there. I was a journalist for a very long time, for about 15, 16 years, and that was in broadcast, radio, television. even online. And it got to the point where, though I loved journalism, I wanted to do something that would allow me to write more. So, as in write fiction more. So this is what I'm very, very passionate about. And I'm passionate about writing. So I took a step back and I thought, well, what can we do to actually make this work? So in about 2010, my wife and I started Red Platypus, which is our copywriting business.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there. Why Red Platypus is a name?
I'm redheaded, and we wanted something. I was when I was a bit younger. I was a bit faded now, but and we wanted something kind of Australian, so something that was just interesting to us. Okay. So we chose Red Platypus, and we used it initially as a way of helping us to travel around the world. So we had moved to London in 2008, had a great time. I was working in journalism there for places like the BBC and that kind of thing. So I was, living the dream. And then it got to the point where we wanted to do more with our lives and see more of the world. So we started traveling. At the same time, we started this copywriting business as a way of keeping the wolf from the door, allowing us to keep traveling whilst we were working. So it earned us a decent amount of money while we were working as freelancers, basically, all around the world. And we even picked up clients, in different countries that are still our clients now. So we can say that we are a suburban copywriting outfit in the northern suburbs of Perth with international scope. Global reach, worldwide. So it's been a really good thing to do. And we specialize in working with small businesses to tell their stories, because, I don't mean to preach to the choir or preach to the master of the choir, but copywriting is about telling a story and connecting with people. And I see so much that copy can be very dry and very boring. So we work with clients to find their story and tell it through the medium of copywriting so that it's authentic and it's genuine. And we like working with small businesses, especially since the pandemic, because a lot of people are pivoting to something that they're passionate about. And so that's really magnetic for us, where people have pivoted years ago to do something that we liked. And doing this means that I can work at home. We've been working at home long before, since it was fashionable. And we also raised 2 young daughters. I've got Ruby, who's 4, and I've got Bronte, who's now about 1 year old. And it means I'm a very hands-on dad. We basically split parenting duties straight down the middle, sometimes more and sometimes less, depending on the working day. And we fit everything in, and it's a real juggle. It's stressful at times, but I would not change it. And it also means that I get a few hours every day, if I so choose, to do some fiction writing. So I think someone told me the other week that the key to happiness is not money, it's not power, it's not any of these physical or accoutrements that we think. It's the key to happiness is the simple ability to control your own day. That's it.
Well, I totally agree with that. I think similar. Yeah. I think Bob Dylan said, freedom is waking up and doing what you want to do, and that sort of thing. And it is so true. But the autonomy that working for yourself and running your own business can give you, and working from home allows you to create, to what's the scaffold your life around that. And then at the end of that day, at the end of the day, you feel, okay, what have I achieved? I've done my core work that I need to do to pay the bills. That took the morning, and now I've got the afternoon to do what I want, as you said, to write books and stuff.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of discipline. It's very easy to get distracted and to also give in to the temptation to clean the house or to do that load of washing or do the gardening, because it's always there. It's always there.
Or to open the bar at 3 PM. No, that's my life, not yours.
Yeah,
100%. So I want to go. I've got a beer here. No, it's actually water. It's all right. Let's just go back a bit. Now, after you graduated WAAPA, where did you go? Where did you start your journalism career?
Well, I was very young when I started WAAPA. I was 18, so I came straight out of high school. And when I graduated from WAAPA, I was, say, 21. And I wanted to be a journalist from a very young age. I'd also wanted to be a writer. So these are sort of the two sides of the cerebellum. But journalism was really appealing to me because in the back of my head, though I wanted to be a writer, I felt I needed experience. I needed that sort of Hemingway-esque lust for life, where you build up a bunch of experiences and then you write about them. That was the way I kind of thought as a young man.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I embraced the opportunity to get. I got a job with GWN, Golden West News, up in Geraldton. I was the Midwest correspondent up there for about a year, and that was an extraordinary experience. Working up in the sort of Midwest and the wheat belt and the desert communities out to the east, and all the way up to Carnarvon. It was an enormous patch. And myself and another 18, he was 18 at the time, I was 21. He was like a skateboard video kid, he was the cameraman. And we would drive around in this like Holden station wagon with the GWN logo on the side. And we'd get 2 TV stories a day out of it. We would roam all around, and that was like nailing jelly to the ceiling, like 2 TV packages a day. It was impossible, but somehow we did it. And, you can put up with anything when you're young. So it was like, I look back on the pay stubs and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'd have been better off pulling pints, but it was great experience. And I met lots of farming communities and people in small towns, Indigenous communities, and it exposed me to things that I'd never really seen as a young guy living in the suburbs of Perth. I'd done some traveling at that stage, but to like Europe and the United States, and I'd never really had my limits really pushed. And so that was a great experience. And then I got poached to go to the ABC in Kalgoorlie, which was an even bigger step up.
I was going to say, so that was radio or TV?
That was radio.
Radio, yep.
So the radio. I had some scope for TV, but that was predominantly radio. If there was like a big story, we would do TV. Like we had Mark Latham come to Kalgoorlie after he lost the federal election. And let's just say
previous weird Mark Latham. Anyway, yes.
If you remember, 2 weeks later, he like stepped down as the leader because he had appendicitis or something.
Oh, that's right.
And that was after he came to us in Kalgoorlie. So,
what did you do to him, David?
We took him out, But that was a great experience. I mean, I came there not being able to play pool or drink, and I came back. I'm a crack shot at the pool table now.
Kalgoorlie would do that to you.
Absolutely. So I definitely got my fill of that, and regional journalism was just a wonderful thing. I mean, I went back to Perth as well, into the Perth City newsroom for the ABC, but then went back to the country. I went to the southwest I was based in Bunbury, and that was fantastic. I just roamed all around the southwest from Bunbury all the way down to Augusta, just meeting people every day and telling stories and being that community hub for the ABC and the news. So,
but that is so vital though to the communities, that having that voice of their own local area, which sadly has been reduced now as as funding gets pulled and stuff like that. So that's another story for another day.
Definitely. It is sad to see. It's much eroded. I often wonder how I would go being a young person now entering journalism, because I had a lot of great older people to teach me the ways. Uni was great, but actually learning from people who'd been around the block and who would tear strips off you for things, but that they had the courage to tear strips off you for that, because it wasn't ever done in a mean way. It was done in a, this is for your benefit. And you would learn very quickly, and you would learn the deep minutiae and the subtlety of how to write good, effective news copy that communicated something. And then that caused you then the next story to go out into the field with a mindset of, okay, well, I need to gather this particular bit of information, or I need to ask this question. And it made you step up to your duty a bit more. And just, if you read newspapers now, I'm not trying to be deeply critical, but just the amount of typos that come through.
I know, there's no sub-editors anymore. They're getting rid of them. And whether it's in the ABC or whether it's in the commercial sector, it's all cost reductionism and all that sort of stuff. And all these young journos, it's almost like they're illiterate. But normally in the good old days, you would have a sub-editor to pick you up on that. You talk to people like Gillian O'Shaughnessy, and she wrote a piece just a little while ago, and I was reading that. She was talking about when you pass your work on to the sub-editor and they just run you down in front of everyone else and go, hello, well, who wrote this rubbish? And you don't have that anymore.
No, that's right. That's right. And then, Locust Summer is a story of, he's a journalist. It's not based on me, but he eventually becomes a sub-editor because that's an important role to have. So, in praise of the subs desk, you would fear them mightily, but for good reason, because it made you better. And so, in contrast, when I went through the editorial process with Locust, that was so nice. It had the same level of detail and minutiae, but it was done in such a gentle way compared to journalism, which is like no holds barred.
Unless when you
even changes, I'm like, it's totally fine.
unless when you see the whole book come back with track changes and it's just covered in purple, and you
covered in red.
But I think that's one of the beauty things about being traditionally published or having an editor is actually taking your work to that next level, and that's what the editor brings out in you. And when you don't have that, there's no opportunity to learn, to grow, to be a better writer, and that's what the editing process does.
Yeah, no, very much, and that's what I really enjoyed writing fiction, because it broke me out of the factual-based writing of journalism, because I think it got to the I'll keep going on the adventure actually. So after that I met my wife Carmen, and I went traveling for a time and then came back, and we went traveling together again. So I went through Asia myself and the United States. I taught sailing at a summer camp in the United States, which was the best job I ever had.
Wow.
Just on a lake with sunfish yachts, and pull the tiller in, there you go. Off you go.
And all these kids going, oh, really? Do I have to?
Go on. But after that, came home, went over to London just in time for the 2008 financial crash. Which was
well done. Nice timing.
It was a great time. I got my first job in journalism selling copies of the Sun newspaper outside tube stations, which was like going from rooster to feather duster, It's just,
wow.
That was cool.
Great learning experience, though. Those life skills, amazing.
Absolutely. And I worked as a teacher's assistant at some pretty hard schools in North London, which I actually really enjoyed. It was a really eye-opening experience as well. And but then got to work in BBC World News, and that was like the apogee of the epitome of everything I ever did. That was like the Jedi temple of journalism. That was really
that would
cool.
be an absolutely amazing place to work. So did you see any big? Were you there when any big breaking stories would come in and the whole newsroom would just change and that sort of thing?
Yeah. My first day was the Christchurch earthquake.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And then a few weeks later, it was Japan tsunami and the accident with the nuclear reactor at Fukushima. And then it was Arab Spring. That whole year was, I think it was 2011. That whole year was just absolute chuck me in the deep end. I'm producing TV and bashing the phones and trying to get people up to speak to us. And I was on air, I was producing the program like in the lead up to Osama bin Laden being killed. So 10 minutes before our show went to air, Obama came on the news feed and said, we've done this. And we then went live to air almost instantaneously over the top of that, chucked our scripts out and just rolled for about 4 hours. And that was really intense. Yeah, I was even there on the day Margaret Thatcher died, and that was the BBC newsroom is an open plan newsroom. So, and it starts with the domestic desks on one side of the corner and goes all the way to the international desks with everything in between. And so the phone call that Thatcher had died came in on the domestic desks, and it reverberated all the way through to the international, and it was like a wave of chaos. So it was just it was like being in this festival of shouting people. There was a guy standing on a desk with two phones going, you do this and you do this and you do this. It was,
they would have had the obituaries already written though, wouldn't they?
Pretty well. But it was just this scramble. Like, oh my goodness, what do we do? We would
that's the energy. That's the energy that I think that a lot of people don't get to see behind the scenes, do they?
Just feed off it. And then on air, this is the BBC. But we would always start a shift. We would all knock on the desk and say, not on my shift, which meant the Queen doesn't die while you're on your shift. Because not only would that be a terrible event, that would be the biggest bit of work you probably ever have to do. It would, yeah, it was like, not tonight. It's all
Not
ready to
tonight.
go.
Make it easy tonight. Don't let the Queen die.
No, that's the equivalent of launching a ship with your hands. You know, it's just a huge thing.
So, as a producer, so I don't think you could not be an introvert as a producer, could you?
There were introverts, but you had to speak. It's like being an officer in the army. You know, you have your technical crew who are all really good at what they do, but they're looking to you for the orders. And then you have your presenter looking to you. To give it the military analogy, I always thought of myself as like the crew chief of a Spitfire. You know, the old World War II fighter plane. It was my job to make sure that the plane was ready to go and everybody knew what they were doing, and then the presenter would jump in and pilot it. And then I
like the analogy, yeah.
And then I would go in the control room and look at the radar, and I would help them to fly into the battle. But if you're not there making sure everything is okay and ready to go, then the plane crashes. So you can be an introvert, and that's okay, but you have to give orders, and you have to speak, and you have to know what you're doing. So it was very stressful. I had grey hair all the way through the sides, but I loved it.
Because it's all live, and that's the thing. I mean,
no homework, never took it home with you. You're done. Walk away.
But yeah, I think it takes a certain personality to be able to do that, I reckon. And
there's part of me that likes the action. I'm reasonably introverted most of the time, but there's part of me that craves the action and enjoys that and kind of glories in that pressure. There's another part of me that just goes, I think I just want to read a book and curl up a bit. But I think that's okay. I think that's kind of in everyone to a greater or lesser degree. I just had to find ways to manage it.
So you ended up chucking all that in and just going traveling then with your wife, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. So we started a travel blog as well called Double Barrel Travel. I have a double barrel surname. So a lot of people think it's a blog about guns. We have a lot of disappointed American readers. Where are the guns, man? But we started that as a way of writing creatively and keeping that practice up a lot. And that really helped me with keeping up my creative writing, with keeping up the action that I want to do, and embracing the artistic side rather than the more technical side of journalism. Journalism is definitely an art form, but more of an artisan art form.
I was actually going to say, how do you think your writing as a journalist and a copywriter informs your fiction writing?
That's a good question. Well, it comes from a very different place, but I think journalism comes from my brain and from my fists. When I'm fighting for something good and righteous, and I have to get it right, and you have to get everything factually lined up, but you also have the duty to ask certain questions and that kind of thing. Whereas fiction comes from the heart, purely from the heart. And that itself has elements of the other things, but even to the point where I feel it comes from a different hemisphere of the brain. It comes from a different area of the brain. But the discipline of copywriting and the discipline of journalism is really, really helpful. I can meet deadlines. I can make myself write certain amounts every day. But at the same time, I struggled in the early times to open myself up to that. Like, my parents are artists, so I should be able to.
Gotcha. I was actually going to ask you about that, what kind of upbringing you had, but obviously you're surrounded by that sort of influence in that family.
Very, very much. I mean, my grandfather was a diesel engineer, so he inherited that business from his father, so he was forced to do that. And he kind of tried to get me interested in engineering as a kid. I'm not. I'm like the classic kid in your books. I'm always looking out the window. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. That's one of my main superpowers. But at the same time, I'm actually deeply interested in mechanics and that kind of stuff. But in a creative way. And my parents, were pretty conventional for the first, say, 10 or 12 years of my life. But then my dad packed his job in as an accountant to open a mosaic studio. And my mum has always been an artistic person. And so now they run a mosaic studio that makes massive artistic installations all around Perth. They teach kids, they do kits, they do all kinds of stuff. And our house is just this incredible, well, my childhood home is this, they call it Gandhara, which is the place of light, you know, from Monkey Magic.
Wow, I love that. I love that.
It's full of statues and mosaics and all this kind of thing. And then I have 5 aunties who are all artistic as well. So one is the costume director at NIDA over in Sydney, National Institute of Dramatic Arts. Another aunt was a doctor in music. She played at Carnegie Hall for the clarinet. She was the head of the conservatorium in Tasmania. Another was a interior decorator, another costume designer, and then my mum, who's this artist. So I always had this artistic bent. But it was always I saw it in the process. I never saw it as the expression. So when it came time to
you were, because you're exposed to it, it was like, this is normal.
Yes, totally.
This is a normal way to live. And having your father quit his job to open the business and all that, that normalized just the throwing it all away. I'm going to risk it because I'm going to follow my passion. I'm going to do it.
Definitely, I saw it, but at the same time, I saw the hard work that went into it too. But it definitely modeled that for me. But back to my granddad, like I loved him deeply, and he was a great guy because I called him Palmer. So he's who the book is dedicated to.
In the beginning, yes. Yep.
God says to Palmer, who best educated me. So he was a funny guy. Like his nickname was Nutty when he was a kid, and his father was a World War I. He was an Anzac, and he was a decorated sort of a very strict guy. But Neville, my grandfather, sort of rebelled against that while he could, and he became very, very interested in architecture and art and books and music and reading. And even though this business was forced upon him, he still indulged that. So when I was a little kid, at about, say, from the age of 5, every Saturday, Palmer would knock on the door at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd answer, and he'd say, "All right, Mr. David, would you like to come with me today?" And I'm like, "Well, what are we going to do?" He goes, "Potluck." And if I ever said no, potluck, could be anything. So I'd get dressed and we'd jump in his old banged up old Mercedes Benz, and we would drive to Fremantle to taste the best pies in WA because they won a blue ribbon. Or we'd go to the opera, or we'd go to a French film festival, or to see the Whitbread round the world yacht race yachts come in. Later on in life, he took me traveling to Europe twice. This is all on the smell of an oily rag. You know, we had bags of like chocolate bars and stuff that we called iron rations, and we would literally sometimes only eat that during the day. But we got to see, Prague and Paris and all on the smell of an oily rag, and went to the United States and traveled around there, just doing all this.
So he took you there, and he wanted to really expose you and show you what life could be like, really.
And I want to educate you before the Americans do. Which he did, and I inherited all of his books. So his place in Wembley Downs was just filled with books, and so all the girls, all the aunties I mentioned before were his daughters, and he encouraged them to follow their dreams, and he encouraged them to express themselves because I think he had been denied that.
Yeah.
So
what a kind thing to do, I reckon. That's really kind.
And I told him that I wanted to be a writer, but he was pretty well gone with dementia. He was on his death's door. He said, "Give him hell, Dave. Do it." And so I've taken that.
Give him hell, Dave. I reckon everyone needs a Palmer in their life.
I was very blessed. I was very blessed to have him. He was a scallywag. He just didn't give a fig. He was like, "I'm going to do what I'm going to do." Even in the days when he had diabetes quite badly, and my nan speaks like people used to speak. She's like, "David, make sure that he doesn't eat anything sweet." And I'm like, okay. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. We're in Paris, rat infested crap hotel, and I can just hear this like, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's got this bag from Falchon, which is like one of the most famous patisseries in the world. He'd snuck off during the day. We didn't know where he went, and he'd snuck off to buy all these cakes and like eat them secretly because he was like, whatever, when am I going to be back in Paris eating the finest patisserie cakes ever? So
I
he used
kind
to
of love
call-
that attitude. I love that.
Yeah.
Mm.
He called it poobing about. Poobing about. So
Poobing
that's what I
about.
do. I poob about. Gosh,
I can
So I've always
okay.
had-
I can now see where all these threads come together, David, and
yes.
where
This is
you.
like therapy. This is great.
Well, my show is like therapy, but it's coming. All these threads come together, which gives you that wonder of life as well. And but I think it's that quiet confidence to go, I'm going to do this because I've been told, I've been seeing, I've been looking, I've almost been living this feeling that it's okay to live like that, to go be curious, to be full of wonder and explore and wow.
Definitely.
Wow.
It's hard to maintain. It can be hard to maintain. I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in a Catholic environment where things were quite certain things were very closed off, and other people didn't ever quite understand. I did not have. Let's just say I did not have comparable weekends to my classmates.
Oh,
so
okay.
What did you get up to this weekend? We watched the footy. We went fishing and all that kind of thing. I could never really say that. So, I mean, Locust Summer is about a guy who feels like an outsider. So, it's not autobiographical, but in doing this, I've always felt like an outsider. I always feel like I'm a bit weird. But that's what I like about writing, in that I've found my tribe. I found all the other. I found, we're the island of misfit toys. I found all the other weirdos. So
I was actually going to segue into Locust Summer, which you did beautifully. Well done. Thank you for that. I don't know doing that. I was going to say, how many the main character Rowan, how partially autobiographical, but are there any other elements of you in him?
I think he's a bit more of a downer than I am, if I'm quite blunt. Well, Locust Summer's set on a farm, so it's the
let's do that. Let's set it up for the people who don't know.
Okay,
do the book pitch.
So this is tough. So Locust Summer is the story of the Brockman family. The Brockman family have been on the land in the Midwest for generations, but the father's dying. The eldest son, who was the natural heir, is dead. And the youngest son, Rowan, is a journalist working in the city, and he does not want to be a farmer. But the time comes when his mother decides she's going to sell the farm and sever their life from the land. This is something that farmers in Australia just don't do. You fight to the last dollar. But she's made the very tough decision, and she calls Rowan up and says, "You've got to come home. This is the final harvest. This is definitely not what he wants to do. He does not want a bar of this. But he has to. It's his final chance to make things right and to perhaps try and understand where he's come from before it disappears altogether." So Locust Summer is the story of the relationship between Rowan and his mother, between Rowan and the land, and the history that he has with it. And if he can overcome some things to create a new future for himself. So it's a bit of a tribute to the land. It's a portrait of the harshness that it's used with experiences that I've had doing it. And I even worked on a farm over in the east. So
because I read some of you actually went and did the harvest over east in New South Wales or somewhere. So you speak from experience of actually how it works. So I'm going, you've got an intimate knowledge of harvesters, how it all works. The in catchers and the chasers and all that.
The chaser bit. Yeah, I did it all. I'm no expert, but I had a go.
Yeah.
And back to just taking a chance, saying yes to things. A friend of mine, Alex Cullen, who worked with me in ABC Kalgoorlie, we were sitting around one night having a whiskey on the back porch and a fire because it gets very cold in Cal. You don't think of it, but my goodness. And he would talk about the family farm that he had and this harvest that he would always. He always went back to it. And had a wonderful time. And I said, "Can I come?" He goes, "Oh yeah, if you think, yeah, sure, come on." So I booked a plane ticket the next day, and off we went, and we did 3 weeks of the harvest, and it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It was pivotal. It was like a real coming of age thing for me. I was working in the sun with this wizened crew of rural labourers and holding my own, and just learning a lot. And I had a very positive experience. I had a very positive and accepting experience. because they don't really care where you come from. That's another thing that opened my eyes as well. You think of farm work as this very white bread, male dominated kind of thing. Not really. When I was there, it was people from all walks of life. All they cared about was, could you muck in and do the work?
Yeah. Can you do it and not be arrogant about it? And I think
that's right.
Your main character, Rowan.
So this is the thing. I kind of took, like Carrie Fisher once said, nobody wants to read about happy, well-adjusted people. So I kind of took that spirit. I was like, well, I've had a very good experience. How can I write in a way that celebrates farming, but also shows the harsh realities of it? So I needed a way to unlock that story. And early drafts of the book were very much about Rowan and his dad. But I realized it had to be about Rowan and his mum, because that's the uncomfortable stuff. That's the uncomfortable area where I think the character himself didn't want to go. So that's where I took it. And that allowed me to explore some of the more recalcitrant parts of his personality. So I think I'm a much more positive person than Rowan. Not to say he's not, he's a good kid. He just needs to come correct on a few things.
But it's the whole point of the redemption, isn't it? It's the rite of passage. It's the redemption. It's so many different things are happening in this book that it's sort of, all these metaphors and these symbols. One of the things I was talking to my husband Andy and about this book, and because you've set it in the Midwest and you've captured the feel of that region so well, it's Perenjori, Minganoo, Morawai. Which town is it? I know you've made a fictional version, but have you actually modeled it on a particular town? We can talk.
It's an amalgam. It's an amalgam. So it's the town itself is called Septimus.
Yes.
It's named. So that's.
Was it John Septimus Road, wasn't it?
John Septimus Road, named after him, and that also has a bit of subtlety to it, because Rowe is a celebrated explorer, but he was also involved in the Pinjarra massacre.
Yes.
So there's a few that ties into some of the themes there. But you say Perenjori, Free Springs, Carnamah, that Mullawar, that kind of area. I love that part of the wheat belt. That's the part I when I was a journo in GWN Geraldton, and also I also did an 18-month caravan trip around Australia with my wife and youngest daughter. And
is there anything you haven't done yet?
Bloody things have I done.
Yeah, getting back to the area. Yep.
Yeah, so we went through that area for the first 6 months. That's where the wreath flowers are.
Yes, the Megapanther, or something. Andy keeps telling me the name because it's so famous.
So wonderful, and the people out there are just wonderful and welcoming. But there's also a quite dark history. That's rabbit-proof fence country. That's A.O. Neville country. That's all kinds of stuff going on. The Yamaji history, but also geologically, the Yilgarn Craton. So it's this. I go there and I just feel infused with inspiration. It's just this gorgeous, amazing landscape. But then you look at it again, like there's a great book by a writer called Tony Hughes-Death. I think that's how you say it. It's called Like No Place on Earth. And it's a history of how literature has described the wheat belt. The wheat belt can be seen from space. It's this denuded strip of land that, yes, we grow our food in there, but at the same time, to clear that vegetation was an enormous task over generations of people. And so the landscape itself has been so influenced and changed, and it's the most amazing place. And people that live out there have such deep connections to this land. So whenever I go out there, I'm just so interested in all the different cross currents of history and culture that come to it and tell its true story. So Locust Summer tries to...
Because you can just look at it, you can be the tourist and just go through some of those towns and go, oh yeah, nice. But as you said, there's so many different layers, and especially for the people that live there, they breed them tough in those areas. It gets so extremely hot. The way you described the heat in Locust Summer is exactly what it's like there, and the weather can change instantly. A storm can roll in and everything's soaked, everything's wet, everything's dust everywhere and all that sort of stuff. But it is the way you've described it. When I was talking to Andy, he goes, oh my God, it's almost like he goes, oh, I don't want to go back there, because it was his teenage years in Morawai, in his 20s, and he's going, I don't want to be reminded of the heat, all that sort of stuff, the loneliness, these So many tropes, because I was talking with him about the Australian Gothic tropes, and your book is so full of them. You know, it's the decaying architecture, the landscape. It's the anxiety that's sort of running. There's this anxiety that's run through this book. There's a little thread at the back. You know, isolation, repression. There's the lost person, which is, you know, either could be Rowan's father who gets lost going to the bush. His mind is losing his mind, his dementia, all these tropes that are happening in this book that I didn't even, you know, talking to Annie afterwards, goes, it's so full of it. And I'm going, it is true.
Yeah.
It's just, and the way you've captured it, it's almost like, I have a philosophy. I don't read fiction to escape. I read fiction to learn something, to be a better person. Can I be a better person after I read? So that's why there's a lot of categories and genres that I don't read, but your book just gives me that insight into life there, all the different nuances or the relationships between all the people, and that redemptive thing of Rowan, and the relationship between him and his mother. As you said, there's a line in the sort of early start when you find out that the brother, the older brother who was meant to inherit the farm, is dead, and how his mother feels about that regarding Rowan. And it's like, I go, oh shit, where's this going now? And again, it really sets it up. So that was really good. But one of the things that I'm amazed at, you said it in the late 80s.
Yes.
Around the America's Cup time.
America's Cup.
Why?
Well, if you see behind me, there's a lot of, these are America's Cup posters.
Oh, yachts.
Partly.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yes.
Okay. My dad was the one who designed the Royal Perth Annex down at Fremantle Yacht Club Annex. So he designed that. So anyway, so he's part of all that, and he got to go out onto the Black Swan, the tender boat that went out with all the yachts and all that. He took his new girlfriend every time, you know, took him out. Anyway, so never took the kids, just his girlfriend. And recently he said to me, oh, do you remember those times going out on the Black Swan to see the yachts? Wasn't that great? I said, you never took us. And he went, oh sorry. Anyway, that's a funny story. But anyway, so just missed it by that much. So it's the yachts, but how did you go about doing the research? You described the 80s so well, though.
Thank you. Well, I'm a child of the 80s. I mean, I'm born in 82, so I do have some memories of the 80s. Cocktail and Kokomo and all that stuff. But it's a period of time that I've always been quite interested in. So my grandfather, Palmer, was involved in the syndicates for the 87 challenge. And he was also pretty heavily involved in some of the stuff for 83. So I grew up with it. I grew up with America's Cup. These are his America's Cup posters. Right. I saved them. I'm a bit nostalgic, so I tend to save stuff. So I took that, and I'm a sailor myself, and I like that. You know, it's a very important part of my life. But I wanted to set it in a time where there was change in the air. And, you know, it wasn't to avoid using social media because they have the CB radio. So I don't think there's a lot of writers say, oh, you know, I'd be reluctant to set something now or maybe 5 years ago, but I don't think it's an issue at all. Because the technology is, if your story's good and your writing's good, that stuff is workable. But 86 was a time of great change. That's when the state government was like ramming through massive infrastructure projects and tearing down some of the older buildings in Perth to make way for skyscraper, you know, the Bond Tower, kind of thing. The annex was going in Fremantle, Hillary's boat harbour. We were supposedly growing up from country town to international city because, you know, we won the America's Cup. It was the biggest, most glamorous thing, and it was coming to Perth and Fremantle, and we were like, yeah, we won. And we probably all woke up the next day with a massive hangover and went, oh no, we've got to host it now. Jeez, get the Glen 20, get the spray and white. We've got to
you know how far it went. I grew up in Shenton Park, and the city of Subiaco ordered everyone to repave their driveways. They were going to chip in half the cost.
Wow. Oh my God. I love that. I love that time. And it's also a time where Rowan should have been excited, but he wasn't. But I just wanted there to be Locust Summer. I like to think it works in multiple layers on layers.
Oh yeah,
on layers
it does.
on layers and everything interconnected. And that's a good thing to have in the background. And just to say, I like that you picked up on the loneliness there, because I love Drysdale paintings. You know, the cricketers.
Oh, yes.
Essential thing. Even Sean Tan picks up on this with his work. There's like an essential loneliness to Australia. There's a loneliness to
Is it isolation or loneliness?
I think it's a beautiful kind of loneliness. It's not a bad loneliness. It's a kind of America's all of, United States stuff is a romantic vision of the frontier, of the endless possibilities of the wilderness. Ours is very, at least in a settler conception of it.
Yes, from the Western perspective, yeah.
It's kind of a loneliness, a sort of stoic aloneness, and that's, I think that's reflected in our jokes and in our sense of humor and our laconicness and our separateness and our. But I wanted that to come across. So it's lonely, but in a sense, it's a kind of like I say, it's a beautiful loneliness. And I think if you can include that in any book, I think that helps you to capture the Australianness of something. Yeah. But then contrasting that, I traveled around a lot and went into a lot of Indigenous communities, and I loved how I had my mind really opened by an elder out at Nanandara lands up on the WA Northern Territory South Australia border. And I went for a walk with her in this like Spinifex country where she'd lived in a humpy for most of her life. When her husband died, she moved back into the town. And she was just saying, "This is my land. Welcome to my land. And I'm looking around with my kind of Western eyes, I suppose, and I'm seeing Spinifex and very distant hillocks. And I'm like, oh, and then I slowly kind of cottoned into, this is her backyard. This is her front yard. This is everything to her. There is no loneliness here. There is no distance here. And it just made me think of things from a very different perspective. And so I tried, to put that into Locust Summer, because Rowan is going home looking for meaning in his home and not particularly finding it until a couple, I won't spoil them, but a couple of events at the end that I consider make him realize there is much more to this place. There is much more to my parents. There is much more to me than I had ever understood. And all of a sudden the blinkers come off.
Yes, he has that awakening experience, doesn't he? But he has to get pushed, literally pushed to the limit to have that, to be broken open, as I say.
Yeah, 1986 is a good year for that, because we were trying.
Yeah, exactly. But that Indigenous aspect, I think you've brought that, you've paralleled that with the farmers. As you were saying, anyone who's a farmer who's on the land, it's like, you don't walk away from the land. That's the shame that happened. But it's that connection to the land, and the Indigenous people have their connection to the land. Whereas most city folk, we have no understanding of what that is. And I think you bring that highlight that quite nicely in Locust Summer.
Thank you. Well, I'm trying to do that. I mean, that's why I like the 6 seasons. I think we need to have that.
Oh, definitely.
Because it just helps you look out the window and go, oh yeah, that's why that is today.
Yeah.
But I think the connect. That's why I was saying before. It's the layers of things when you go to that country. I wanted that to be reflected in the book too. That the farmers have their own story. They have their own connection. They have the weight of expectation from the previous generations. They have the investment of money and time and blood and effort. The incredible effort that they go through to bring in these wheat crops. But at the same time, there's this salinity that's on the edge of the land because of mismanagement of the land by some. And it's also a time, 86 was a time when the farmers in the Midwest were really starting to change how they were doing things. They are, I think, they lead Australia in terms of soil management and fighting salinity levels. And you're seeing it now, like, there's a lot of pastoralists up in the up in the north that are turning their land back into the bush. Letting it rest for a bit. The bush comes roaring back, and then they have a different way of managing the cattle on the land. So it's about learning to function better with the land and think differently. Of that. it's a slim book, but there's a lot in it. You know, I'm trying to,
Yeah, I was going to say we've
copyright.
discussed a lot because I was going to. One of the things I was going to say, because I could talk forever about this, but is that your copywriting and your journalism, has that made you a tighter writer? If that makes any sense?
I think so. I mean, something Hemingway said, you know, use short declarative sentences.
Yeah.
And I like that, but I also like to use run-on sentences. And I like to that. I just speak purely. But the writers that I love are people like Louis de Bernier and Paulo Coelho and you know, very beautiful lyrical writers, Lawrence Durrell. But I don't think I've not attempted to be that, because I also like you know, more shorter, punchier kind of stuff. But I want your eyes to roll down the page. I want it to be propulsive. I want you to be engaged. But the problem you can't approach it as a journalist, because journalism is facts presented in order, whereas writing is, you've got to dig into the emotions and you've got to find
you found your freedom in this writing then, haven't you?
I really did. I really did. I mean, it took me 9-10 years to do, and I loved every second of it. I wouldn't change any of it. It was a really deep journey of, I suppose, discovery of the things that I could do creatively, but that I always kind of knew I could do, but I had to have the courage to do it. You know, you have that little voice in your ear, and I finally listened to it and I honored it. And, you know, early in the drafts, I think I wrote the book technically very well. It's just it was missing a lot of heart, and to actually dig into those areas and to actually confront some of those issues and bring it into the book was the making of the book. It wasn't anything terrible.
Didn't Laurie Steed help you with the?
Very much. Yeah. Yes, very much. I have to give props to Laurie, Papa Laurie. He's helped many writers, actually. But Laurie's a great friend, and he was also a professional mentor and editor for me in this book. So I went through a really great period of time, wherever, I think about a year. I was on a caravan trip around Australia with my wife and kids, and writing at night on a little fold-out table outside the caravan under the stars, or wherever I could make a writing desk. And with Laurie, diving into what the book is about, what it's really about. I think that's that's a different concept from what the book is. You can write, you know, we can all write, we can write reams of stuff, but what's it about? What are you actually trying to say? And so we go again and again and again until I found what it was about, and then bang.
I love that. So Laurie just pushed you and pushed you and pushed you.
In the nicest way.
Yeah, but he believed in you enough to go, I know it's there. And then now you have this amazing book that's just going to go gangbusters. What's next? What are you working on now?
I'm working on a book that takes some true stories from my family around World War II, around Fremantle, and I'm twisting them, and I'm taking the bit of the history and I'm twisting them.
Okay.
So it's a little darker than Locust Summer, if that's possible. But I'll give you a hint. My nan said to me, I enjoyed the book, David, but you need to write something with a bit of murder in it.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. There's a taster for you, everyone.
Definitely. So it's called, the working title is Black Clouds, which is what Paul Keating called Memories of World War II.
Okay. Black Clouds. And have you, how far are you at with it?
Fourth draft.
Okay.
Fourth draft. Yeah.
Okay. Publisher?
No. No, not at this stage.
You're waiting to hear back.
No. I'm waiting to get something that I can send. I don't think it's ready for anyone to quite look at yet. But I've got a fellowship through the National Trust to go stay in John Curtin's house in Cottesloe.
Oh wow!
So they're giving me yeah, it's really cool. It's this new program that you can apply for as a writer, and they hook you up with a different historical property throughout WA. There's even, you know, there's like a cabin, a little house in the East Perth Cemetery that you can stay in. Like, imagine if you're like a horror writer and you're staying in the cemetery.
Oh, that would be so awesome.
So I'm writing about World War II, and I'm in the World War II Prime Minister's house where he lived during the conflict. So I've got that place for 2 weeks. It comes around every year. So, you know, if anyone's interested in applying for it, keep an eye out. It's the National Trust of WA.
And obviously your wife is quite happy to look after the home and the kids while you're off riding.
Well, she keeps saying she gets a trip to Bali when she gets the jab. No, she's very, very understanding of what I do and very supportive, which is great. So
that is fantastic.
She's very creative.
David, one last question.
Sure.
What lights you up?
Whoa. Nice escargot. The pastry. that and a long mac.
I love that. Something's just so simple, isn't it?
What lights me up is genuine enthusiasm. Genuine enthusiasm for something. It's very easy and very common to be cynical about stuff and to say what you don't like and to be defined what you don't like. But I love when people wear their heart on their sleeve and they say, I love this, no matter how embarrassing it could be or however, that just lights my fire. And I'm really always really happy when people do well, when they succeed at something. I love seeing that. So that's why I love seeing you succeed with this, because I think this book is going to go absolutely so well. It's such a great book. I thoroughly recommend it. Locust Summer, out by Fremantle Press. David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Josh. And thank you for all you taught me all those years ago and for having me on your show. It's wonderful to speak to you again.
Not a problem. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.